ladies and gentlemen!" The match announcer shouted with what could only be described as genuine glee, his voice crackling over the worn speakers of matron Cast's ancient pad. "The Iron Bishop's repulsion has sent Alex Rider flying. Will she? Yes! Valera Dent is chasing, following up with a vicious barrage of strikes. The defense spec of Captain Rider's Karnis is no joke, but the Bishop is peerless in finding vulnerable attack points with her Kestrel. 2 blades are always better than 1, and Rider lands a heavy kick, and it's the Chief Warrant Officer's turn to be sent sailing. I must say, this is a fight for the ages." In the small hands of an 11-year-old boy, the borrowed pad vibrated lightly with every exclamation the announcer provided. It didn't bother the child. It made the fight that much more enrapturing. And even if he hadn't been able to see the 2 S-rank CAD users going at it, he thought he might have managed to imagine the details of the bout just from the descriptions. Fortunately, the matron kept the clear smart glass tablet in good condition, and so it was with wide eyes in a dark room that the boy watched Valera Dent and Alex Rider break against each other, like titans made of flashing light and carbonized steel. As an exhibition match in commemoration of Valera Dent's retiring from the professional SCT circuit, the field had been randomly selected. The 2 users fought in 30 yards of open grassland, the standard size of any competitive dueling ring, their movements completely uninhibited by obstacles or deterrents that were commonplace in other zones. No trees, no buildings, no scattered stockpiles or crates. It allowed for a truly unfettered view of the fight, and the child who had snuck into Cast's office to watch didn't think for a second he was the only one pleased with the choice. Captain Alex Rider's Karnis was a breathtaking device. As an S-rank, his CAD covered every inch of his body, forming an intricate battlesuit whose interlocking plating shimmered and shifted with each movement the man made. The standard tricolor, it was mostly gold and green steel, with accents of light blue vicetrium, and it complemented its user's stellar strength and defense specs with its bulk. Rider was a mauler type. The initial form Karnis had manifested as undoubtedly having been some basic design of the massive 2-handed hammer the man was now whirling at his smaller, lighter enemy. As the device and its user had grown in ability, though, so too had Karnis upgraded and evolved. To the boy taking in the captain now, Rider reminded him of a lion, powerful and graceful despite his massive size. On the other hand, when it came to grace, Alex Rider was outmatched twice over by his opponent. Chief Warrant Officer Valera Dent moved with the speed and elegance of some great raptor of war. Kestrel's externals, suspended over both her shoulders, completed the illusion almost too well, the 8 angular modules floating like the broad red feathers of metallic wings. They served a purpose, of course, allowing Dent to channel her CAD's electromagnetic energy freely, granting her the ability to skate over the twisting grass of the plains without so much as a hint of effort. Her device was the antithesis of Rider's. It was spare and dignified, a mirage of minimal red plating over a skin-tight blue underlayer, detailed in glowing white. All of Dent's vitals were armored, but Kestrel sacrificed S-rank defense for the speed and offense that had made short work of so many of the Iron Bishop's opponents in her years on the circuit. Even the woman's weapons could not have been more different. A pair of identical, narrow sabers whose handles and blades matched the colors of her armor, ivory vicetrium forming long, florid edges. "Oh!" The announcer's narration came through again loudly. "Captain Rider has thrown his hammer in an attempt to bring Dent down. This can only mean one thing. Yes, magnetic hunt, an ability both of these fearsome opponents share. As you can see, ladies and gentlemen, Karnis will hound the Bishop across the field until it takes her out, or Rider recalls it. Magnet hunt is a high-level ability and cannot be maintained long by your average combatant. But then the captain is anything but average." "No, go, run!" The boy didn't even hear himself shout. Too mesmerized he was with watching Valera Dent hurtling a foot above the ground around the edge of the simulated grassland, attempting to shake the massive hammer that was now careening after her, as though attached by an invisible chain. She was skating backwards, trying to keep an eye on both the weapon and Ryder himself, the glowing white eyes and the red plating of her helm flicking between the pair at an astounding rate. All the same, Ryder saw his moment coming, and when the time was right, he bent low, not unlike the crouch of the lion he so embodied, preparing to pounce. Then, with a crunch of shifting ground, the captain lunged. There was no ability triggered, no trick to the move. Alex Ryder's strength and speed specs were simply so significant that the man was able to clear 15 yards of distance in a blink, catching Valera Dent in the moment she looked away from him. His heavy golden-green form collided with the lighter user, slamming her into the invisible perimeter wall of the dueling field, with a crunch that made the simulation shiver and flicker for a moment before stabilizing. From the pad, the boy heard the "oh" of the audience, lucky enough to be watching the match in person, but the excited shouting of the announcer was lost as Ryder reached out with one armor-clad hand, the other pinning Dent to the wall by her throat. To her credit, the chief warrant officer didn't so much as struggle. Not even when the massive hammer that had been chasing her flew into its user's waiting grasp with a satisfying clunk. Instead, she calmly brought a sword up in a thrust at Ryder's faceplate. A flick of the captain's head kept him from being run through the eye by the glowing blade, Karnis already lifting, ready to come down on the bishop. Unfortunately for him, even that brief dodge cost him his focus long enough for his opponent to turn the tides. The second sword slashed in an upward arc that only someone of Valera Dent's caliber and skill could have achieved, from the awkward position of being pinned to an intangible wall. The bright blade caught the arm that held her in place under the elbow, between the gold plates of Ryder's armor, passing clean through. The limb remained intact, of course. CADs in simulated combat matches were always phantom called, but the wrist went immediately limp, along with the hand and fingers around the chief warrant officer's neck. At once she took advantage, and with a lateral blast of electromagnetic energy, skated sideways around the solid boundary just as the hammer impacted where she'd been a moment before, with another static jolt in the physical projection. And Valera Dent strikes the first true blow of the match, severing her superior officer's neural connection to the better part of his left arm. The announcer's voice came back to the boy as relief at Dent's escape washed over him. Fear not, new viewers. The captain will regain full function not long after this duel is over, but for now he's down a limb. Not a good place to be for a mauler.